Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
اعتدت الشرطة الإسرائيلية على عدد من الفلسطينيين خارج المسجد الأقصى بالقدس خلال احتفال إسرائيل بالذكرى 38.
The Israeli police assaulted a number of Palestinians outside of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem during Israel's 38th anniversary celebration of its occupation of East Jerusalem. The police shot a number of sound bombs towards the Palestinians at one of the entrances of the sacred mosque and arrested one of them. 70 Jews were touring inside of the mosque where hundreds of Palestinians threw stones at them, wounding 2 people. The days that the Palestinians commemorate as the setback that befell them in 1967 of the last century, when the West Bank and parts of East Jerusalem were occupied, are the same days that the Israelis celebrate as the unification of the 2 parts of the Holy City, announcing it as the eternal capital of the Hebrew state. During the early morning hours, thousands of Israelis came to the Barak Wall, or what they call the Wailing Wall, one of the entrances leading to the Aqsa Mosque, celebrating Jerusalem Day.
We are not prepared to compromise on Jerusalem in any way. It has been our spirit and the land of our forefathers for more than 2,000 years.
I'm very affected, especially on Jerusalem Day, the anniversary day of its liberation after more than 2,000 years, that we were denied entrance to go to the Wailing Wall to pray.
For these Israelis on this day, the facts on the ground are not enough for them, indicating their almost total control over the city of Jerusalem by surrounding it by settlements and eliminating Arab ownership of the land. Many times throughout the day, extremist Jews tried to raid the Jerusalem Al-Aqsa Mosque and Sacred Square, leading to separate clashes between these various groups supported by the occupation soldiers and Palestinian youth.
In the framework of preparing for this day, we decided to open all the mosque doors to all religions without conditions.
However, the restrictions imposed by the Israeli police on the Palestinian worshippers entering the sacred mosque refute this claim. Once again, the Israelis restricted the age of those allowed to enter the mosque to 45 and above.
I hope that the Israelis act in an extremely reasonable manner and leave the mosque without provoking the Palestinians, especially on this particular day. However, they consider that the Al-Aqsa Mosque represents the core of the city of Jerusalem. Thus, for them, not being able to enter represents a lack of sovereignty over it.
The focus on the sacred sites and continued attempts to raid the sacred Al-Aqsa Mosque contributes to the transformation of the issue over the conflict in Jerusalem to a religious issue. However, reading the situation carefully indicates another political reality. The fact that Jerusalem is now home to more than 700,000 Israeli citizens and that 65% of them are Jews is significant. Shireen Yunus, Dhabi TV, Occupied Jerusalem.
Up until the last minute, the police debated whether or not to let Jews visit the Temple Mount today, Jerusalem Day. As a trial, the police allowed a small group of people to go up to the mount.
There were hundreds of people there, and the minute they saw us, they started shouting.
Somehow, someone came in from behind and shoved him to the floor. At the same time, thousands of dancing protesters filled the streets leading up to the Wailing Wall. That was when the commander in the area ordered an entry by his forces.
Someone came and started to calm the people.
Then the satellite channels of the Arab world started reporting.
The settlers entered under the protection of Israeli forces who launched sound grenades towards worshippers.
Tens of thousands of Israelis have visited the Temple Mount over the last 2 years since it was reopened. All visits until today went without disturbance. This peace was maintained under the authority of the Muslim Waqf, who gained a lot of money from tourism.
Our call to allow all to enjoy freedom of worship on this day was the right one, despite the disturbance that occurred.
Towards the noon prayer, the police decided not to take more chances.
If you're not 45 years old, you can't enter.
The Temple Mount was closed to Jews and Arabs.
There will not be a Palestine state on the Temple Mount.
So after 6 hours of hard work, the police were able to leave the most explosive place in the world.
Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty King Abdullah returned home after a several-hour visit to Egypt, during which he held talks with President Hosni Mubarak. During the talks in the Egyptian Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, the two leaders discussed means to push forward the peace process in the Middle East, based on principles stipulated in the Roadmap Peace Plan. The King and the Egyptian President stressed on the need to launch final status negotiations between the Palestinians and Israel, calling on the two sides to respect the understandings they reached during their February 8th meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh. The two leaders reiterated that the establishment of an independent and geographically integrated Palestinian state is the only means to end violence and regain security and stability in the whole region. They said the planned Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip should mark the start of a complete Israeli pullout from the West Bank as well. The King and Mubarak warned against dangers posed by some extremists who seek to undermine the ongoing truce, especially attempts by some fanatic Jews to enter Al-Aqsa Mosque. They voiced support for the Palestinian Authority and President Mahmoud Abbas's efforts to spur the economy and build effective institutions. Iraq and bilateral ties were also at the heart of Sharm el-Sheikh talks. The two leaders voiced support for the Iraqi government's efforts to ensure that all Iraqi groups take part in the political process. In Iraq, a mortar bomb killed 5 civilians, including 2 children, late yesterday in Mosul, in northern Iraq. Police said 4 suicide bombings this morning killed 1 and injured 14. 7 security men were injured in 2 suicide bombings in Baghdad and Tikrit. The 3rd suicide attack in southern Baghdad injured 5 Iraqi soldiers, while the 4th attack in northern Baghdad killed an Iraqi soldier and injured 2 civilians. An Iraqi colonel said a mortar bomb attack on the police headquarters in western Mosul killed a civilian and injured 2. Another mortar attack on a U.S.-Iraqi military base in Yathrib, north of Baghdad, killed 1 civilian and injured another. In Sharqat, north of Baghdad, a gunman and a woman were killed in a gun battle between armed men and soldiers. An Iraqi translator working for the U.S. Army in Kirkuk was also reportedly killed. In central Baghdad, gunmen killed a police colonel yesterday. Near Samarra, north of Baghdad, a police source said 2 Iraqi soldiers were killed in an attack. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army said an American soldier was killed when his convoy was attacked north of Baghdad. Yesterday, U.S. troops discovered a huge insurgent bunker complex dug into a quarry in western Iraq with air conditioning, showers, and a large stockpile of weapons. The U.S. military, which described the bunker as the biggest insurgent hideout discovered so far in Iraq, said no one was in the bunker when it was found.
Welcome. Hezbollah and Amal claimed a massive victory in southern Lebanon in the 2nd stage of national elections Sunday, a vote Hezbollah says it hopes will prove its strength and send a message of defiance to the United States. Hezbollah deputy leader Sheikh Naim Qasim and Nabih Berri of Amal confirmed they had won all 23 seats in their region bordering Israel. Unofficial counts indicate the alliance had won more than 80% of votes. About 45% of the electorate turned up at the voting booth, a turnout that exceeded all expectations. Interior Minister Hassan al-Sabah confirmed the results. Immediately after their victory, Hezbollah nominated Biri for another term as Speaker of Parliament. Following Hezbollah's victory in the polls, the Israeli Foreign Ministry called for the group to be disarmed. It said, quote, "The solution to Lebanon's problems will begin with the full implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1559, which calls for the disarmament of Hezbollah." Mohalif Fakir has a story.
The coalition of Hezbollah and Amal claimed the clean sweep of all 23 seats in southern Lebanon in the second round of parliamentary elections. Hezbollah number 2 Sheikh Naim Qasim told reporters after Sunday's vote, the Southerners wanted to state clearly a yes for a unified stand toward the resistance and for the unity of Lebanon. They gave a clear message to the foreigners, quote, particular to the Americans, that the people of Lebanon are unified over the resistance and the independence. The Resistance, Liberation and Development Coalition of Hezbollah and Amal had been expected to achieve a landslide victory, with a pledge to keep on with the armed resistance against Israel. Amal leader and Parliament Speaker Nabi Hariri told his supporters this was not a steamroller victory, but a win like the quote, waves of the sea that cannot subside before fulfilling its demands and objectives in ending deprivation and deterring aggression. Hezbollah, the only armed group not required to lay down its arms after Lebanon's 1975 to 1990 civil war, because it was spearheading the resistance, has vowed to continue to fight for the occupied Sheba Farms border district. Hezbollah officials have repeatedly accused the administration of President George W. Bush of interference in Lebanese affairs, including in elections. The U.S. maintains Hezbollah on its terror list. Many in the Shiite Muslim heartland see a vote for Hezbollah as a vote for the group to retain its arms as a defense against neighboring Israel. It had occupied the south for 22 years until 2000. Sheikh Qasim said the international community must listen to yesterday's vote. Hundreds of supporters waving Amal flags celebrated outside Biri's villa as a result began to trickle out. Others drove through villages and towns. Lebanon's first general elections since Syrian troops quit the smaller country are being held region by region over 4 weekends until June 19th. 6 candidates from the Hezbollah-sponsored list have already been elected by default, including Hariri, who was not actually on the list but was allied with them, sister of slain Prime Minister Rafik al-Hariri. In the south, the Amal Hezbollah ticket won 6 seats before a single vote was cast, due to the lack of challengers. Interior Ministry sources said turnout among the 675,000 eligible voters was 45%. Damascus had backed both Amal and Hezbollah during and after the civil war, and both parties largely stayed out from the anti-Syrian protests that swept Beirut after the assassination of former Premier Rafik al-Hariri. Those demonstrations forced Syria to bow to world pressure and end its 29-year presence in Lebanon in April. Now, the biggest challenges facing the new parliament include the UN resolution demanding Hezbollah disarm and demands by the anti-Syrian opposition for President LaHoud to resign. Both are divisive. The anti-Syrian opposition is expected to win in most parts of Lebanon, but the key issue in the south is different. Banners in many southern towns urged voters to choose the Amal Hezbollah list as a rejection of international pressure to disarm the group. Some Christian opposition politicians had called for an election boycott, complaining the shape of the districts made it difficult to challenge the slate. Turnout was lower in Christian areas where supporters of hardline Christian figure Michel Aoun handed out leaflets declaring democracy has been burnt. But Aoun had backed some candidates in southern Lebanon. Christians constitute 18.3% of the southern population, while Muslims, mostly Shiites, are 81.7%. Turnout was particularly low in Christian areas in the border stretch once occupied by Israel and largely deserted by its residents who fled to Israel and other destinations after the Jewish state's pullout. Sunday's vote comes just days after the killing of a prominent anti-Syrian journalist, Samir al-Qasir, which, like the murder of Hariri, is blamed by many on Beirut's pro-Syrian leaders and their political masters in Damascus.
Western Monitor said the second round of Lebanon's 4-stage legislative elections went smoothly. José Saraflanca, the head of the European Union's observer team, said nothing unusual had been reported during the balloting. This is the first time international monitors supervise Lebanese elections. On a tour of the polling stations, Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati said there were, quote, small complaints regarding mistakes in the names of some of the voters, but that was resolved. 7 people were wounded in pre-election violence in Sawfar on Sunday when supporters of candidates in the Mount Lebanon elections, opposition leader Walid Jumblat and rival Talal Arslan, clashed. Troops intervened and separated the two sides, detaining 20 troublemakers. It was not clear how the clash in the mountain resort began. Clashes also occurred in Kornayel and Baath. During an electoral rally, central and eastern Lebanon will vote next weekend in what promises to be the most heated round of polling. Pro-Syrian President LaHoud has vowed to stay in office, despite facing opposition blame for the assassinations of former Prime Minister Hariri and anti-Syrian journalist Samir Kassir. Edith Karam has the story.
President LaHoud dismissed calls for his resignation by the opposition in remarks that followed Maronite Patriarch Cardinal Nasrallah Boutros Sfair's rejection of opposition attempts to oust the president by force in a demonstration which had been planned for today. Sfair's stance during his Sunday sermon prompted the opposition groups to postpone indefinitely Monday's demonstration, which was meant to demand LaHoud's resignation. Sfair, a longtime critic of Syria, said, quote, "The one who waited 30 years can wait for an additional month in order for things to be done the legitimate way within the framework of constitutional institutions." He asked if the Lebanese have forgotten that there are hidden forces that want to prove to the world that Lebanon cannot rule itself. Fearing instability, Sfair has previously called for refraining from pursuing efforts to remove LaHoud from office before the end of ongoing legislative elections, due to be completed on June 19th. In a statement, LaHoud expressed his attachment to the pledge taken to protect the constitution until the last minute of his term. LaHoud said he had previously refrained from reacting to attacks by the opposition, not because of weakness or hesitation, but in order to save the country from more divisions. LaHoud's term was extended by 3 years in September by a Syrian forced constitutional amendment, just a day after a United Nations resolution ordered the end of foreign military presence and interference in Lebanon. Mass protests following the February 14th assassination of former Prime Minister Hariri forced Syria to bow to international pressure and end its 29-year military presence in its neighbor. The killing also sparked calls for LaHoud's resignation, which were renewed after anti-Syrian journalist Samir Kassir was killed by a car bomb last Thursday.
Mrs. Nazik Rafik Hariri received the Sheikh Rashid Humanitarian Personality Award on behalf of her late husband, Prime Minister Rafik Hariri, in Dubai, in honor of the assassinated leader's humanitarian legacy. More with Muhalil Fakir.
Sheikh Ahmed bin Saeed Al Maktoum, chairman of Dubai Department of Civil Aviation, President of Emirates Airlines and Chairman of Rashid Pediatric Therapy Center's Board of Directors, awarded the Sheikh Rashid Humanitarian Personality Award, bestowed on assassinated Premier Rafik al-Hariri, to his wife Mrs. Nazik. The award is a biennial event organized by Rashid Pediatric Therapy Center, RPTC. Several members of the Hariri family attended the prestigious ceremony held at Dubai World Trade Center, including the late leader's Bahauddin's son and daughter Hened. Also present was Prince Faisal bin Sultan Al Saud, Secretary General of Al Saud Charity Foundation, among other sheikhs, diplomats, and renowned personalities. Addressing the ceremony, Mrs. Nazik Hariri regretted the absence of her slain husband and recalled his affinity to Arab countries, especially Gulf states. She said the late Hariri was impressed with Dubai and its leadership. It was his vision for Beirut to be a center for development and national unity. She stressed the family will not relent in its quest to uncover the perpetrators who murdered the former premier, and voiced confidence in the United Nations Security Council probe into the February 14th bombing. Mrs. Nazik said the murdered prime minister left behind a social and political legacy and a humanitarian record that is manifested in the award she received on his behalf. For his part, Sheikh Ahmed said in a speech read on his behalf by Ahmed Hashim Al-Khouri, one of the founders of RPTC, the gathering marked a historic event in paying tribute to a charismatic personality well loved in the UAE, with which he had a special relationship.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad vowed to press ahead with reform as the Baath party opened its first Congress in 5 years, facing questions about its nomination from critics at home and abroad. Assad said Syria had to fight corruption and solve structural problems in its economy. Baath party members have said the 4-day meeting should authorize new political parties and free local elections, although hefty restrictions are likely to accompany the reforms. Assad called for large popular involvement in decision-making. Edith Karam has the story.
The Syrian Baath Congress comes as President Bashar al-Assad's regime is under increasing international pressure over reported missile tests, a clampdown on dissidents, and Damascus's role in Lebanon after the pullout of military forces. Ayman Abdul-Noor, a self-described reformer and Baath party member, told AFP the Congress would propose free local elections in 2007 and a new law on political parties allowing them to be formed as long as they are not religion or ethnic-based. In April, the Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist group banned since an armed uprising in the 1980s that marked the biggest challenge to the Damascus regime to date, renewed its call for free elections and an end to the state of emergency. Syria's emergency law has been in effect since 1963 and gives sweeping powers to state security forces. Leading opposition figure Riyad Turk said he did not believe the Congress would create miracles because, he said, it is not the Baath party that is in power. Turk stressed, quote, "Those who govern are the military, the secret services, the mafia and the families." The editor-in-chief of the official daily Al-Thawra, Fayez Zayegh, said, Syria has been engaged for 5 years in a process of reforms before pressures were put on it. The Baath Party, which means resurrection in Arabic, is founded on notions of Arab nationalism and unity and took power in Syria in 1963. Its last Congress was held in 2000 when it nominated Bashar al-Assad to lead the party following the death of his father, former President Hafiz al-Assad. Back then, the younger Assad presented himself as a reformer, and his political message was viewed by the opposition as signaling much anticipated democratic change. But under pressure from the old guard, he soon toned down his promises of democracy and returned to a more traditional Syrian regime with a focus on economic reform.
أخذت المنافسة في الانتخابات الرئاسية الإيرانية منحا.
Competitions in the Iranian elections took a new turn as the 8 presidential candidates announced their election platforms. Only 2 weeks before the elections, they promised the Iranian public that they would fulfill their promises should they win. These elections are unique because of the diversity of the candidates and their political orientations.
العهود مع الشعب وجه آخر من الدعاية الانتخابية.
As a part of the election campaigns, presidential candidates are making promises to the Iranian public, hoping to gain the votes of those who have not made up their minds yet. Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani's platform consists of 14 points which confirm his commitment to social justice, elevating the living standards, implementing economic privatization, shrinking the size of the government, and enhancing Iran's international position.
Election centers that belong to Sheikh Hashemi Rafsanjani include people with diverse political orientations, such as leftists, centrists, reformists, conservatives, and those of different religious backgrounds, such as Zoroastrians, Armenians, Ashurians, and Chaldeans.
Presidential candidate Mahdi Karoubi promised to provide 50,000 dirhams, or equivalent to $60 a month for every Iranian individual, confirming his commitment to the public. His platform includes 12 points, centering on the idea of reforming the country within the framework of Islam and pursuing economic development as well as social reforms. Presidential candidate Ali Baghrani from the Mubtadi'in trend is running under the slogan "A fresh breeze of air and a government of hope." His platform focuses on 4 points: improving the living situation, increasing job opportunities, building the economy on scientific advancement basis, and effective governing. Mohammed Baghir Ghalibaf from the Mubtadi'in trend uses the slogan "For a good life that suits the Iranian people." His platform is based on reforming the economic situation, establishing a government that serves the people, and fighting corruption.
The foreign policy that will be adopted by Ghalibaf will be based on dialogue and brotherhood with neighboring and Muslim countries. He also calls for establishing reasonable relations with the world and serving Iran's national interest.
Mohsen Radi'i from the Mubtadi'een trend uses the slogan populist and effective government and calls for reconstructing the government and economy, fighting corruption and creating job opportunity. Candidate Muhammad Ahmadi Nojad, who is also from the Mubtadi'een trend, focuses on social justice, providing equal opportunities to all young men and putting people first when making economic and political decisions. Candidate Nahr Ali Zada, the head of the sport agency, took advantage of President Khatim's visit to the Iranian national team. He lifted the banner of the Rafah government. Nahr Ali Zada focuses his election campaign on establishing sustainable development and fighting poverty. Mustafa Mu'in, who represents the reform trend, uses the slogan "One Step Forward." He focuses on democratizing the regime and building confidence measures with the world. Thus, it seems that the common denominator among all candidates is improving the economic situation, getting rid of international threats, and taking advantage of opportunities to improve international relations. However, each candidate has his own platform in order to achieve his objectives.
Many people in Islamic countries who cannot find a cure to their ailments resort to Nabawi medicine, or what is known as medicine of the Prophet. In many areas, people seek treatment through the use of the Quran. In Malaysia, one of these alternative doctors has gained fame and fortune, inspiring him to join politics and run in local elections.
Dozens
of Malaysians visit this clinic every day. It belongs to a Malaysian religious man by the name of Harun ad-Din. The people here are seeking a cure after modern medicine failed to cure them. In this two-story clinic, Harun offers his patients treatments that mainly rely on reading verses of the Holy Quran over a bottle of water that the patients then drink to rid themselves of bad spirits.
When that happens, she's unable to control herself, so we calm her down by reading verses of the Quran. We do all that we can and we pray to God. We don't have connections to the spirits or the devil.
In most cases, the people who seek the Dar al-Sufiya clinic seek a cure to their strange or unidentified illnesses. The person with the healing power personally makes house calls and goes to the people's offices and shops upon request to chase away bad spirits.
We receive phone calls all the time to rid certain areas of bad spirits, in addition to personal treatments.
Harun is at the clinic every Tuesday, and the rest of the week relies on dozens of other doctors. They admit about 400 people a day. The treatment lasts less than a minute. He recites verses of the Quran over bottles of water which are later consumed or used to bathe with. Some doctors are cynical towards Harun's practices, as he has to seek Western doctors to treat his heart condition, something that he can't treat himself. But his patients had something else to say.
I've been here since 7 in the morning because strange things bother us. They are spirits. They bother us in the morning while we are trying to go to work. It gives us stomach problems, fatigue, and headaches. It prevents us from leaving the house.
According to Harun, his services are free, but his aides say that the patients donate at least $300 a day. This profession has bestowed Harun with great respect as a religious man. He is the deputy of the spiritual leaders within the Islamic Party in Malaysia, a party waiting for his magical touch to achieve political success.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.